I guess my first question is going to be, did anybody disagree with anything somebody else said? So if we look at maybe start off with the market size and how well the industry's performed. You know, everyone's got different stats, I'm sure. Are we still seeing, you know, that little bit of growth, and what are the predictions for growth from you? I know you probably think don't all talk at once, so I will. Yeah, Todd, I can see you on the main screen at the moment, so I'll ask you from your and Waystone's perspective.
Yeah, no, I was listening intently to Mark's introductory comments, and it's interesting. We are seeing the growth that Mark was reflecting, and for us, you know, it's almost a nuanced answer. We're asking the where. So we do see very few greenfield opportunities for the enterprises. We interestingly enough, we're seeing a lot of growth in GBS options. So enterprises have become more comfortable with the offshoring model. They do see the rise of AI. They believe that they would like to have more control over that going forward. And as such, we're seeing a rise in the number of, I'm going to call it repatriations that are occurring. Now, what's interesting is this is not leaving the traditional service providers alone. They're actually being brought along for that journey, and they find a place not only helping them transition, but a permanent role within the enterprise's GBS as well.
Okay. Any adds on that, Naresh?
Yeah, so building on what Todd just talked about, we're seeing a definite shift, and companies are looking to change and transform. And our projections, you know, human labor perspective, 60% jobs in advanced economies are at risk with AI, right? And 70% of tasks are going to get automated leveraging AI. So what this is forcing enterprise to rethink. And that's where we're seeing that shift is occurring, where they're leveraging technologies. And that's really what's key. And then from a service provider standpoint, how do we adapt to that? How do you make sure that you're able to engage? So going back to something Mark brought about earlier, yes, we have the BPO stuff happening. There's definitely going to be growth in that front, but it's more like the global competency centers focused on leveraging technology, not just people, right? And that's the shift. And that's as suppliers or providers on that front, they need to adapt to that changing world, and not just saying take a BPO across, but most companies are looking, how do I leverage it, get the benefits out of the technology, and then have that done in those other locations. So there's a shift occurring, but definitely, you know, everybody needs to adapt, not just the buyers, but the providers as well.
Yeah, and Kerry, I think that when we look at growth as well, I mean, I think that from an Everest Group perspective, we think that there is going to be growth in 2025. It's different though. I think CX is still going to be relatively flat because of where we're seeing the impact of AI. In other parts of BPO and in ITO, we're seeing more growth, but it's also, I think it's going to be different by verticals. If we look at tech and media and telco, we saw a bigger drop in the last few years, or in the last year, but that's rebounded quicker. Whereas you look at something like energy and resources, didn't decline as quickly from a growth perspective, but isn't on the uptick as quickly as well. So I think it's going to be very nuanced by vertical. And I think going back to something that someone mentioned earlier, there was a lot of focus around industry vertical capabilities, and that's where enterprises are starting to think, yeah, we want people who've got that real domain expertise, who understand our business problems. So there will be growth, but it won't be consistent across all geos and all horizontals. It will be different depending on where that market is, where it's been in the past.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on market size and growth? Cool. So I want to go back to, I can see the questions coming on in. Thank you. Keep them coming. I promise we've got a load of time to come to those. But we did actually ask all registrants to put questions forward. So we've already got a stash of questions which I've grouped, and I'd like to take some of those first, and then we will come to the questions coming in live from the floor as well. So yes, there was a number of questions that were really looking at the role of global competency centres and how that was changing, and whether there was actually going to be a big move towards, you said repatriation, Todd, but also to insourcing. So can we take that subject, and maybe if each expert could put their hand up so I know who's going to answer, so don't answer at once. So yeah, what's the views there? Because there was definitely a degree of concern that insourcing was going to be on the rise.
I'll take it, Carrie, if you.
Thank
yeah,
you,
sure.
Peter.
You know, we've seen this movie before. I remember when I got into the analysis game 20 plus years ago, every time there was an election cycle, every time there was some type of a monumental event going on, repatriation of jobs was coming up. The idea, the concept of insourcing was coming up. There's always been a lot of rhetoric around it. We've not seen a tremendous amount of rubber hitting the road, though, from a historical basis. Now, I would say this. I think now there's probably more willingness on the part of consumers to demand repatriation of jobs, and probably more willingness of enterprises to look at potentially repatriating them. What's going to be the impediment is the cost of actually doing so. The idea about how much, say, a contact center, a frontline worker will have to be priced in the United States is significantly higher today than it was even 2-3 years ago. And the same goes across for all key major Western demand markets. So I think sentiment is one thing. What I think is going to potentially recalibrate or redress some of these desires is the actual expense of undertaking large-scale remigration or reintegration of jobs that are already offshore back into a domestic delivery perspective.
Yeah, Mark, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't find the put up hand thing up. I was just trying to look for it. So yeah, I very much agree with what Peter just said in terms of the repatriation of jobs. We're seeing a lot of hype around, reshoring in general, right? So this trend to reshore jobs back. It's currently being focused more on the manufacturing sector, but there is talk that it may spill over into the services sector. So there may be this focus on reshoring jobs, and either through incentives or potentially even penalties for organizations to reshore. But I think that certainly the trend of your captive capability centers is going to increase. You're seeing more of them are becoming more confident in doing it themselves, whether it's onshore or offshore. You're seeing a lot of them also moving offshore. But in that process, they're not necessarily going to drop their third-party BPO providers. They're certainly going to collaborate more with them. There's going to be a lot more co-sourcing that I believe is going to happen. And so what you're going to find is, because of the shifts in data privacy, cybersecurity, those sort of things will probably be handled onshore or by these capability, the SCCs, by the captive capability centers, and you'll find that other elements they'll outsource. And then there's also going to be this augmentation that's going to take place between automation, AI, and human-centric services. And I think all of that is going to coalesce into this new sort of model of how the outsourcing industry could potentially move forward.
Yeah, no,
right, Todd, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Mark's perspective, and I think, Peter, to your point, language is one of those things that always kind of gets in the way. When I hear folks talk about repatriation, I don't necessarily think about things moving cross borders. I was thinking more like what Mark was saying, is I might have now enterprise-owned GBS centers still in the same geographies.
Mhm.
And in fact, we're seeing enterprises starting to follow the service providers into tier 2 type of regions. They're recognizing the advantage. And I think they would acknowledge, Peter, your point. It would take a significant push to overcome the financial hurdle of labor at this point in time. Now, ironically, people are pointing to David over there and his observations around AI, and saying, when will the tipping point occur, when we've now pushed through all the transactional jobs and activities, and now we're just left with the judgment-oriented ones. And given the advantages of proximity, from not only a time zone perspective, but from an industry knowledge perspective, is it time to rethink those?
So I'd like to add to what Todd just talked about. So, and Peter as well. So as new technologies have come into play, most companies felt they can leverage this internally and drive that change. But I think as service providers need to take that, embrace that, and help them fast track that change. So a lot of this goes back to some discussion we saw earlier about the governance structure. How do you enable most, and also going back to what Todd just talked about as well. Most enterprises who has BPO operations or captive centers in other countries, they're recognizing the existing approach is just based on labor, but leveraging technologies, driving those improvements in efficiencies, and then working with service providers to take that over. So I think there's that shift going to have to occur on both sides of the fence to enable this change. But it's going to happen, and we need to embrace the technology change, the impacts to the labor side, but it's something we all have to do.
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, just finishing off on that point, I mean, I think that what we would see is that, I mean, there definitely is a sense that if you're going to automate all the simpler stuff, what's going to be left is more complicated. Is that something you outsource? Is it something you do in-house? And what we're seeing from the enterprises that we speak to is a much more nuanced approach. In the olden days, it was always, it's outsourced or it's in-house. And actually now looking at the type of interaction, is that something you need to keep the skills in-house? Or is that something that you could outsource? And is that ultimately going to go away? And therefore, that's the risk to outsourcing probably in the future as that volume erodes. But the opportunity for service providers is also to think about the skills that the enterprises don't have. So we know that when we speak to enterprises, they're looking for support from service providers in terms of some of that data management, the data cleansing, data annotation, but also some of the governance around that. So there's a whole host of areas that service providers can play on. It's not the whole, if you're just bringing humans, then that's where the risk is. But if you can bring that whole suite of technology capabilities around that to support the enterprise, there's still going to be that opportunity. Because enterprises, if they're looking for services around, one of the questions we get a lot is around data annotation. If you're looking for skill sets around there, that's going to be maybe a short-term need that you need for training models, that actually you're not going to try and build that capability yourself. You're going to look at a third party to help you. So I think it's about evolving the skills that you bring as well, and thinking about the skills that are going to go away, and then the skills that are actually going to be more sustainable in the longer term.
Yeah, thanks for that. So looking at the skills and looking at the talent, where is this talent going to come from? So Mark, you shared a slide that really looked at where, work was being delivered from. We had quite a lot of questions that was actually looking at how the different geographies were going to, going to fare. Quite a few questions about Africa as a continent. So I don't know if somebody would like to share where they think the talent is actually going to come from, and how the delivery destinations are going to fare, and how maybe the geographic footprints and blend of work that organisations are putting offshore might change as well. So quite a lot of questions there, but who would like to take that first? I'm going to pick on you then, Mark.
Okay, great. I had a feeling you were going to ask me. So yeah, so I can speak to where I see it currently being, and I can make a prediction in terms of where I think it could go. So right now we're seeing certainly a lot of interest in Africa. We do a lot of work across the continent ourselves, and there's definitely a lot of interest in Africa as the sort of next horizon of outsourcing and BPO, and a lot of interest in the existing markets, the more mature markets like South Africa and Egypt, but also extending into emerging markets like Kenya and Rwanda and Ghana and Ethiopia, Nigeria, just to mention a few. So we're certainly seeing a lot of interest, and I think talent, there's definitely a need for talent. So I mean, I was in a session just last year where there was between the German it was a German Kenya IT session in terms of driving investment from Germany into Africa, and they mentioned, and I think that the stat was something around 600,000, a shortage of 600,000 IT workers that they have, that they foresee, and that they're going to need to fill, and that's just from Germany alone. And we're seeing that those shortages across other markets, and I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot more decentralization is already happening. There still will be growth in your traditional markets, India and the Philippines, but there certainly is going to be more work that's going to be decentralized to other locations in the LAC and the Africa regions. And then I think you're going to see your regions that have very tech-savvy talent, like Eastern Europe, for example. They're going to focus more on how they can evolve and how they can embrace AI augmented services more, for example. And I think you're going to see them move more in that direction. But where it's all going to go, I believe, is that if you just look at it from a future lens, and the way that everything is kind of coalescing and shifting, I think location is going to become less of a factor as much as it is going to be where can I tap into the talent, and what innovative tech platforms can I tap into to help me manage that talent from multiple offshore locations. And I think that's where we're probably going to see it head over. It's not going to happen in the near future, but I think that's going to ultimately be where it will end up going. And so you're going to see these hybrid models coming out where, with AI augmented talent, and as I mentioned earlier on, these hyper-local hubs of talent that will exist that will be able to service the sector.
So adding to what Mark just talked about, so definitely the talent side is key. In fact, how do you now train the folks in those countries, in those regions? We have an Avasant Foundation working with the United Nations, Rockefeller Foundation, et cetera, to really help develop and train talent, not just regular training, but focused on the newer technology training. That's one aspect. But then going back to the discussion we had earlier, also, most companies, if you're going to do, a captive center or a GCC somewhere, it's got to be also in a stable environment where they feel they can manage that. So it's going to be a complex, a hybrid model there. Make sure there's adequate talent to support the needs, but also, there's no crisis they need to deal with, because if there's, like, for example, stop dealing with the South China Sea today, whether it's semiconductors or whatever is in that area, it's all at risk today. Now, tomorrow it could change, but the point being is we need to make sure that, most customers, buyers would be concerned about that as well. So I think we have to look at it from both aspects.
David, please jump on in.
Yeah, I also think that, as I said sort of in my little bit, I think one of the things that's important is we talk a lot now about where you're going to get the talent from, but actually, do we know what talent we'll need in 5 years? I think we didn't know 5 years ago the talent we would be needing now around Gen AI, for example. So I do think the industry needs to do that work on what type of talent will we need, because I'm a big fan of a lot of the destinations in Africa, but do we know if they'll have the talent? Do we know if the Philippines or India will have the talent that we need moving forward? So I definitely think as an industry, we need to do what type of work would be needed. I also think the sources of talent, not from a location perspective, but how they're employed is important. So whether it's impact sourcing, whether it's gig, those things are also going to be factored in from an industry perspective, because looking for different types of talent that you might need in short bursts, then gig may be a better model for that. So I think that, again, as an industry, I think we need to do that work looking at what talent we think we need, but then also what the right hiring models are, and doing the old school, everyone's going to be in a shared service center or in a contact center or wherever it is, might not be the right model in 5 years. And then also when you think about it from a language perspective, things such as language translation, real-time voice-to-voice translation is not that far away. It's even there now, but needs to scale. That's going to change the need for a lot of organizations as well in terms of thinking about the talent from a language perspective. So I think there's a whole host of things if we think about 2030 that we're not necessarily thinking about now that we should be.
And let's throw the tariffs and the other things into the equation. So, but definitely, this is a rapidly changing environment. How do we make sure that we have some stability around it as well?
Yeah, Naresh, I'm glad you said that. The other thing that we know that that complicates these decisions are things like Forex and inflation.
Yeah.
Right. So there's kind of man-made issues with tariffs, and then
Yeah.
there's global economies that are in play as well. You can absolutely have the best talent, right? But if you can't assure an enterprise of the inflationary movements from the source location, it becomes difficult to think about new areas.
Yep.
Excellent. Right, I'm going to ask the big question, and then I'm going to hand over to you, Tracy, to take all the questions that we've actually got coming on in. So I know it's really important to answer those. So the big question is the impact of AI. I think half of the questions that we actually got from participants were the impact of AI and what it was going to do to the industry. Now, we did an event last year that looked at how the industry had moved, you know, how we've been talking about things like software as a service, but now we're talking about service as software. So who wants to, I mean, obviously David shared a few thoughts, but I'd like everybody else to jump in and have a conversation about, you know, the impact of AI, how we perhaps price it. There's a question in here looking at, you know, should there be a pass-on benefit to the customer because AI makes things much more productive? You know, how do we contract for it? All of those sort of big subjects. So who would like to go? Well, Todd, you're actually on the screen, so you go first.
Oh, no. You know, it's when it comes to AI, I feel like I'm always the curmudgeon. You know, so my background is in technology. I see it working. I believe it is going to have an impact. The conversation I wish we were having was the timing of the impact. Right. So you know, I think all of us on the call have seen the statistics around pilots and the success ratio of pilots. And I think David even kind of highlighted for us, there are pockets of traction, and those pockets are highly attractive because of the results they've been able to generate. But they've almost been in a petri dish where we've said this is the ideal situation for AI, and we immediately want to apply it to everything, right? And it may get there. But no one's kind of answering that question of how long. And just to make sure that I don't just appear as an irrational curmudgeon, I think about AI and I try to sit it right next to blockchain, right? So if we took this exact same panel and got in a time machine and went back a few years, and we were to talk about what's the impact of blockchain on the industry, you know, there was a lot of excitement around that. And now I'm asking what happened, right? Where was the traction that was coming out of that? That was going to fundamentally change sourcing. And we're not talking about that today. And so I'm not saying AI won't have an impact. It absolutely will. But my question is, what's the timing? When do we think it will truly have an impact? And if the timing is very far out, then we should probably be talking about quantum computing and the impact that we think that's going to have on the sourcing market as a whole. So sorry, Carrie, that was not a small answer. That was just a, you know, I'm asking us to reframe how we're thinking about it.
Yeah. And Kerry, if I can just add to Todd's point.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, Peter. I mean, I agree. And I think actually it was an interesting quote many of you probably have seen from Satya Nadella, the CEO at Microsoft. But I think his quote was saying something like, in the beginning of the 2000s, there were 4 million call center employees. And now there are 17 million, despite the fact that we've had all the extra technology we brought in, IVRs, chatbots, all of the CCaaS, I mean, every solution as a service you can think of. But we've gone from 4 million to 17 million call center agents because actually demand's picked up and how you're using the services and new organizations are sprouting up all the time. So actually, I think thinking about it just in terms of, well, what have we got today? We also got to factor in the fact that actually the industry is changing. There will be new opportunities. And as I said at the beginning, our study said people are actually looking to invest more in CX as an example. So actually, it might not mean we see such a massive reduction in headcount for AI, but AI will enable you to do more. So I just wanted to add that point, but that was really interesting that we've got 17 million today. We had 4 million back in the 2000s, but technology hasn't eaten the need for humans in the way that they're working. They're just doing different stuff.
Yeah, bang on. And you know, Dave, you must have ESP because you were reading my mind. I was thinking back when I started as an analyst in London in the early 2000s, and at that time, all the discussion was about how IVR was going to kill the call center. It did nothing of the sort. And you know, I think, Todd, I would also share your curmudgeon title. In fact, I wear it as a badge of honor when it comes to AI. I personally, and I was having the conversation with a friend to many on this call, Mark Hillary, the other day. I'm personally getting sick of clicking on LinkedIn and seeing multiple posts every few seconds about how AI is revolutionizing CX. It's just not. Like it is just not. And, you know, for all the hype cycle that's out there and all the shameless promotion that so many people are putting onto different social media or different elements of popular media about how AI is truly transforming everything. There is what I will say this is I'm happy about. There are some definite good use cases out there that we're seeing that AI is applying to. Agent assist, co-piloting. I think we are seeing some tremendous innovation there. Dave, you mentioned the real-time automated voice translation. I love that technology. It's going to reshape what offshore means going forward. We know this, and the rubber is hitting the road right there. I've seen some amazing demonstration of what AI can do from a content moderation platform standpoint from the folks over at Arwen in the UK. Like these are three real use cases. But going back to the illusion I made a few minutes ago about Space 1999. People are tired of going to conferences and hearing these nebulous 40,000-foot views about this technology. They're tired of hearing all about what it's going to mean without any real use cases. Now we're starting to see the use cases. And Todd, congratulations. I've never heard the expression Petri dish used in a discussion around outsourcing before, so you win the prize on that. The bottom line, though, is I really think there needs to be almost a recalibration of the discussion we're having about this technology. And going to Todd, to what you said, I think is bang on. Some realistic time horizons about AI and what it's going to mean and where it's going to land and how we can use it. Individual use cases are amazing. Let's see how it plays out over the longer term. But this idea about how there's going to be 17 million contact center agents going to be reduced to 17 all through generative AI robots is just a load of garbage.
Peter, I didn't notice your British accent.
You didn't notice it?
You didn't have a British accent the way you were talking. Just kidding.
No, it was a temporary location there. I loved it, but I know I'm not from the UK.
I just want to add to what Todd said. So, you know, quantum computing on that level of computing actually helped push this technology enablement. Think about it that way as well. So I think it's a blended model from that perspective. And as service providers need to bring to the table is how do you now leverage this technology? Yes, Peter, there's going to be a shift. There's going to be timing, and you know, this is changing so rapidly every day. There's some new technology brought out there, but we're seeing significant improvements in processes and how companies are leveraging, buyers are leveraging that today. So, Mark, you were going to say something. I interrupted you. I apologize.
Yeah, no. I think I just wanted to echo a lot of the comments. I think the two key words for me here are timing and augmentation. So I think on the one hand, Genesys also did a study where we actually looked at the impact of AI in different areas of outsourcing, customer experience, data services, and also on finance and accounting. And what was interesting, just echoing what David said earlier on when he gave his opening statements, is that organizations noted that 75% of tasks will be augmented, not replaced, augmented. So you're going to see a lot more augmentation taking place, I believe, with AI helping and assisting agents, not necessarily replacing their tasks. And I think you're also going to see more of a focus on roles that can be maybe there may be some roles that be automated. 25% of the the participants in that report indicated that. But I think what you're going to see is more of a shift to focusing on the augmentation factor, but also driving the looking at, you know, where is this going to take us, and you know, what will these new iterations of AI, how are they going to impact? You know, we haven't yet seen the full impact, for example, of generative AI. We're only in the early stages of this whole new AI wave, and so I think it's difficult to predict where it's going to take us, and I think that's where the timing factor comes in. So I believe that you know, right now we're seeing certainly the focus on augmentation, and I think that's going to happen. And then you're also going to see new roles that will come out from this, AI data specialists, AI strategy managers, for example. So there's also going to be that will happen in terms of new job roles that will be created to manage the AI. But I think timing is the key factor, and I think I'd like to just, you know, pause and think and revisit this in a few years' time to see where AI takes us and where AI goes from a generative AI perspective, and also from a predictive AI perspective, and where that takes us.
Okay, so what timelines are we putting on this?
August.
The expression "how long is a piece of string" is coming to mind.
Yeah, Carrie, I don't have an answer. Maybe just a market observation. We're currently involved in several negotiations, and I'm recognizing this timeline question is putting both enterprises and service providers in a bit of a conundrum, right? So everyone's I'll be vernacular. Everyone's bosses is hearing about AI. They're hearing about the impact, and they're wanting to see it translated into the services that they're acquiring from third parties. Either they want to see it in terms of significant improvement in quality or fidelity of services, or lowering of the price. But when we're contracting for these things, we're not seeing the timeline. We're not seeing, okay, here's when people are comfortable saying, we believe as a provider of these services, AI is going to decrease my delivery costs by 15%.
So I want to add to that. So one of the things we've always focused on is, and you've talked a lot about the contact centers and this customer experience side. Where we're seeing is the technology-enabled disruptive technology is driving productivity gains. Is yes, in that front there's a little bit, but in some of the other process areas it's significantly more. Look at what that's brought to manufacturing and procurement, other types of business operations. You could start to leverage their technology growth in that space. And as we've been working with several of our clients as well, is significant. It's giving them opportunities to speed to market. That's key. You know, decline in operational disruptions, et cetera. So it's happening today. You know, maybe we should have this discussion next year and see where we are. But going back to something Mark talked about earlier, you know, 2030. You know, where will we be in 2030? And we believe it's going to be embedded there. Now, yes, blockchain died. Todd, I got you. I mean, it's still there, but I think there's other reasons why it wasn't that effective. But it comes down to, you know, this is disrupting our world today. And as you know, how do we help our buyers get to a better place from productive standpoint? And what do we do to help them in that growth as well? And basically leveraging technologies, disruptive technologies to help them fast track that side of the fence.